There is a room beneath one of the world's most prestigious museums that does not appear on any floor plan. It has no public record, no visiting hours, no catalog entry that a researcher could request through official channels. It exists because the objects inside it cannot be explained. And unexplained objects, in the world of institutional archaeology, are not mysteries to be investigated. They are problems to be managed. What you are about to see has been pulled from geological records, metallurgical reports, and historical archives spanning 5 continents and 3 centuries of documented discovery. These are not legends. They are not folklore. They are physical objects, tested, measured, documented, and then quietly removed from public view. Each one tells the same story. A story that mainstream history has spent over 100 years trying to make sure you never hear. Stay with us, because once you see the full picture, you will never look at a museum the same way again.
Morrisonville, Illinois, 1891. A woman named Mrs. S.W. Culp is doing what millions of Americans did every winter morning in that era, breaking apart lumps of coal to feed the kitchen stove. The block splits cleanly, and something falls onto the floor with a sound that doesn't belong in a coal pile. She picks it up. It is a gold chain, delicate, finely wrought, looped into a figure-8 coil as if it had been carefully folded before being sealed inside the coal. 81 thousandths of an inch thick. The craftsmanship, by the assessment of every jeweler and metallurgist who later examined it, was exceptional. The coal seam it came from was geologically dated at over 300 million years old. 300 million years. To put that in context, the first recognizable human ancestors would not appear on this planet for another 297 million years. The Morrisonville chain was reported in the local newspaper, examined, verified as genuine by multiple independent assessors. And then it disappeared into an institutional archive and was never publicly displayed again.
In 1912, workers at the municipal electric plant in Thomas, Oklahoma were shoveling coal into the furnace when a large block split open and revealed a solid iron pot, perfectly formed, smooth-edged, and completely enclosed within the coal. No seam, no crack, no point of entry, as if the coal had grown around it over millions of years. Because it had. In 1934, a man in Texas found a perfectly formed iron bolt embedded inside a piece of natural quartz rock. The quartz formation it came from was estimated to be over 500 million years old. Iron bolt, 500 million years. When these objects were submitted to independent metallurgical analysis, not by mainstream institutions with reputations to protect, but by private labs with no stake in the outcome, the results shattered the conventional explanation of accidental contamination. The metal alloys in several of these objects required extreme industrial heat and precise chemical processes to produce, processes that our official historical timeline insists did not exist until the 18th century Industrial Revolution. So the question is no longer whether these objects exist. They exist. They have been tested. The documentation is real. The question is this: who built them? And what happened to the civilization that was operating foundries on this planet before the dinosaurs were gone?
Now, set the metal objects aside for a moment, because what we are about to look at does not come from a coal mine or a rock quarry. It comes from a museum in Turkey, from a document that sat unexamined for 400 years until 1929, when a group of theologians sorting through old manuscripts made a discovery that by all rights should have rewritten every history textbook on the planet. The document was a map, drawn in 1513 by Piri Reis, a celebrated admiral of the Ottoman Empire, on stretched gazelle skin, using dozens of ancient source documents the admiral claimed to have collected from the Lost Library of Alexandria and other archives that no longer exist. At first glance, the map is remarkable but explainable. It shows Africa and South America with a longitudinal accuracy that Western cartographers wouldn't achieve for another 200 years. Impressive, unexplained, but not impossible. Then your eye reaches the bottom of the parchment, and the map shows Antarctica. Not as the featureless ice shelf we know today, not as a rough approximation or a lucky guess. The Piri-Reis map shows the subglacial coastline of Queen Maud Land, the mountain ranges, the river systems, the bays, with a geographic accuracy that modern researchers have confirmed using satellite imaging and seismic surveys conducted through the ice. It matches.
Here is why that is not possible under any conventional explanation. Antarctica was not officially discovered until 1820, 3 centuries after this map was drawn. More critically, the continent has been buried under a sheet of ice estimated at 2 miles thick for a minimum of 14 million years. The coastline depicted on the Piri-Reis map has not been visible to any human eye for 14 million years. Unless someone mapped it before the ice arrived. Piri-Reis himself wrote in the margin of the map that he did not survey this land personally. He compiled it from ancient source documents, scrolls, and charts that he described as originating from before recorded history. Documents that no longer exist. Documents that were already ancient when Alexandria burned. Which means the map is not a mystery of 1513. It is a copy of something far, far older. A civilization that possessed ocean-going vessels capable of circumnavigating the globe, that possessed the astronomical and mathematical tools to calculate longitude with a precision Europe wouldn't manage for another 300 years, that mapped the entire surface of this planet, including a continent that has been hidden under miles of ice for longer than our entire species has existed, and then vanished, without a trace. Or so we have been told.
So where does the evidence go? This is the question that connects everything we have looked at tonight. The gold chain in the coal, the iron pot, the Antarctic map, the skeletal remains we covered in our Ohio Mounds investigation. Case after case, century after century, the pattern is identical. Object is found, object is verified, object is collected by a major institution. Object disappears. Not stolen, not lost, disappeared, in the specific administrative way that only institutions can manage, filed under a classification that no public researcher has the clearance to request, placed in a storage facility whose existence is not acknowledged in any public record, simply managed out of the conversation. The Smithsonian Institution has been the primary destination for anomalous American archaeological finds since its founding in 1846. In its own published history, the Smithsonian estimates that it holds over 145 million individual objects in its collections. 145 million objects, of which less than 1% is on public display at any given time. 1%.
What fills the other 99%? We are not suggesting the Smithsonian is run by villains. We are suggesting something far more unsettling than that institutions do not need malicious intent to bury the truth. They only need the instinct for self-preservation that all institutions share. To display the gold chain from the Illinois coal seam would not just raise questions about one artifact. It would raise questions about every artifact, in every case, in every museum on Earth. It would raise questions about every textbook, every curriculum, every academic career built on the assumption that civilization began 6,000 years ago and has moved in a single, unbroken line of progress ever since. The stakes are not one object in one basement. The stakes are the entire architecture of how humanity understands itself. And institutions, by their nature, do not dismantle architectures. Not willingly, not without being forced. So the objects stay in the dark, and the history books stay clean. And every year, millions of tourists walk through the Smithsonian's grand halls looking at the 1% they are allowed to see, with no idea
what the other 99% would tell them.
Step back now. Step back from the individual objects and the individual institutions and the individual cover-up decisions made by individual men in individual offices, and look at the full picture. A gold chain forged with industrial precision, sealed inside coal 300 million years old. An iron pot, an iron bolt, metallurgical alloys that require technology our timeline says didn't exist. A map drawn in 1513, compiled from sources thousands of years older, showing a continent that has been buried under miles of ice for 14 million years, showing it in detail that matches modern satellite data. Skeletal remains across Ohio, Indiana, and West Virginia, measuring 7 to 9 feet in length, documented in dozens of independent historical records, and then vanished into institutional archives. An underground citadel carved into the walls of the Grand Canyon, reported on the front page of a major American newspaper in 1909, and then erased from every institutional record that follows. These are not random anomalies. Random anomalies do not follow a pattern. This follows a pattern. Discovery, verification, collection, silence.
Every single time. What that pattern suggests is not a conspiracy in the Hollywood sense, not a shadowy group of men in a dark room deciding what humanity is allowed to know. It suggests something simpler, and in many ways, more frightening. It suggests that civilization as we know it has happened before, that humanity has climbed to extraordinary heights of knowledge and technology, and fallen more than once. Fallen so completely that the next cycle of civilization found no trace of what came before. No ruins that survived. No records that weren't buried or burned or locked away. Nothing but objects. Sealed in coal, folded in rock, drawn on the skins of animals by admirals copying from documents that are now ash. The evidence of who we really are and how many times we have already been here is sitting in a basement right now, under fluorescent lights, in a box with no label, waiting. The official story of human history has one enormous vulnerability. It requires you to believe that nothing significant happened before it began. It requires you to believe that the first 6,000 years of recorded civilization are the only 6,000 years that matter. That everything before that, the 300 million years of geological record, the 14 million years of Antarctic ice, the deep strata of rock and coal that have surrendered object after impossible object, that all of it is just empty time, waiting for us to arrive and begin. But objects do not lie. Objects do not have careers to protect, or institutions to preserve, or historical frameworks to maintain. They simply exist, waiting in the dark for someone patient enough to ask the question that the people who locked them away hoped you would never think to ask. Not what is in the basement, but why is the basement locked? We are relic of time. We are going to keep asking. Subscribe and ask with us.